Coming in at number 5, we have the Guy Hoddle memos. Being the tinfoil hat guy, let's kick it off with some aliens, shall we? In December 1936, a man by the name of Guy Hoddle was named acting head of the FBI's Washington field office. He was appointed special agent in charge and served until 1955. So what's so special about this guy? Well, it's the most popular searched file in the FBI vault, the new internet database housing hundreds of bureau records released under the Freedom of Information Act. In the past 2 years, the file has been viewed more than 1 million times, and yet only a semi-redacted, single-page memo relaying an unconfirmed report the FBI never commented on is a hot topic. 63 years ago, March 1950, it was authorized by Mr. Hoddle, taken to FBI headquarters in DC by him, and addressed and hand-delivered to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, surrounding the apparent flying saucers problem. Quote, "The saucers were described as being circular in shape with raised centers and approximately 50 feet in diameter. Each one was occupied by 3 bodies of human shape, at 3 feet tall, dressed in metallic cloth of a very fine texture. Each body was bandaged in a manner similar to the blackout suits used by speed flyers and test pilots were familiar with." Yeah, this is alarming. It was the first file released publicly in the late 70s and posted on the FBI website for several years, but heavily redacted and sharpied all over the place. The Guy Hoddle memo could just be a hoax, or could the infamous events in Roswell in 1947 have led the FBI to this memo? For a few years after the Roswell incident, Director Hoover did order his agents on behalf of the Air Force to verify any UFO sightings. That is true, but that doesn't mean anything came back. Regardless, this FBI report looks and sounds terrifying, and a hoax gone on that long doesn't seem too plausible to me. What do you think? Number 4, PRISM. PRISM is the code name for the program that the United States National Security Agency collects internet communications from various US internet companies and stores it. The program PRISM collects stored internet communications based on demands made to internet companies under Section 702 of the FISA Amendments Act of 2008 to turn over any data that matches court-approved search keywords. Yeah. Basically, they have the right to pry wherever and whenever they want. The NSA program began in 2007 in the wake of the Bush administration, and its existence was leaked only 6 years after its start by NSA contractor Edward Snowden. He basically warned us all that mass data collection was far deeper than the public knew, resulting in it being way more criminal than legal. The disclosure was published by The Guardian and The Washington Post in 2013. The leaked documents include 41 PowerPoint slides identifying several major tech companies as participants in the PRISM program, including Microsoft, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, YouTube, AOL, Skype, and Apple. Yeah, that's like the entire internet. Shortly after publication of the reports, the US Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, released a statement confirming that for nearly 6 years, the government had indeed been using large internet service companies such as Facebook to collect information on foreigners outside of the US. And quote, "Defense initiative against national security threats." Yeah. Admitted it too, huh? Yeah, you really can't do that, as there are kind of privacy acts and laws forbidding that. In a closed-door Senate hearing, FBI Director Robert Mueller said that Snowden's leaks had caused, quote, "significant harm to our nation and our safety." And in 2013, the United States Department of Justice moved against Snowden with 2 counts of violating the Espionage Act of 1917 and theft of government property. Ha! Government property. That's funny. They then revoked his passport, and 2 days later, he flew into Moscow's international airport, where Russian authorities welcomed him and eventually granted Snowden permanent residency in 2020. Traitor or hero? What do you think? Number 3, Operation High Jump. Operation High Jump, officially titled the United States Navy Antarctic Development Program, launched from 1946 to 1947, was a United States Navy operation to establish an Antarctic research base. The operation was organized by Admiral Richard E. Byrd. Operation High Jump, which included 4,700 men, 13 ships, and 33 aircrafts. The war's end also signaled the onset of the atomic age and a desire to secure supplies of uranium and other natural resources. With its almost unlimited mineral deposits and largely unexplored territory of the Antarctic, it was a prize. It commenced in August 1946 and ended in late 1947. Or did it? In August 1946, Chief of U.S. Naval Operations Chester Nimitz, great name, announced that a massive combined military expedition named Operation High Jump would be launched into Antarctica during summer in the most southern hemisphere. The operation involved a variety of aircrafts, including newly purchased helicopters, also known as Task Force 68. Byrd and his team established the Little America 4 base, near where 3 previous bases had already been situated. The frozen aircrafts would photograph as much as Antarctica's land surface as possible during the 3-month operation, photographing the east to the west coast, while seismology tests were also being done. Upon reaching the Ross Ice Shelf, the ships carrying aircrafts, ice vehicles, supplies, tents, sled dogs, they would all establish Little America 4, the official Antarctica headquarters. By the time Operation High Jump was completed in March, a dozen large military flights had already been to the base. One, however, did not, which resorted in the operation to take more of an aggressive search and rescue mission for a downed plane and 3 lost airmen. Due to the weather, the aircraft crashed and a search plane spotted the wreckage 13 days later. Their signal, painted on the wrecked wings, indicated that 3 of the crewmen were unfortunately dead. Since it was impossible to land in the area, messages were dropped directing the other survivors to make their way to open water about 10 miles to the north. The men successfully made the trek and were brought to Pine Island by the rescue aircraft. Other operations would follow, including the US Navy's Operation Windmill in 1947 and 1948, and eventually treaties were signed by all involved nations to ensure that Antarctica remained a non-military zone and more of a scientific hub. Number 2. Operation MK Ultra. MK Ultra was the code name of a semi-legal human experimentation program designed and undertaken by the CIA. The project was headed by Sidney Gottlieb, but began under the order of the CIA Director Alan Dulles. The experiments were intended to develop procedures and identify which substances, such as LSD, could be used in interrogations methods to weaken individuals and force confessions from them via brainwashing and psychological torture. MK Ultra used numerous methods to manipulate mental states and brain functions such as brainwashing, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, and a variety of information-seeking methods. MK Ultra was the birth and start of 2 other programs, Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke. It began in 1953 but was halted in 1973. It was organized through the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence and coordinated with the United States Army Biological Warfare. The program engaged in illegal activities, however, including the use of unwitting and non-consenting test subjects. MK Ultra's scope was pretty broad, with activities carried out under the guise of research at more than 80 institutions, including colleges and universities. Also, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, they were deep. MK Ultra was first brought to public attention in 1975 by Congress and the Commission on CIA Activities. In 1977, a Freedom of Information Act request uncovered 20,000 documents relating to MK Ultra, which led the Senate to some hearings. Yeah, I'd think so. Boston mobster James Whitey Bulger and cult leader Charles Manson were both subjects of these experiments. Interesting. And coming in at number 1, Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip was a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 former German SS scientists, engineers, and technicians were relocated from Germany to the US for government employment after the end of World War II, between 1945 and about 1959. But why? The primary purpose of this secret operation was US military's advantage in information against Soviets, precipitating the space race. Similarly, the Soviet Union Operation Oso Aviakum did pretty well the exact same thing, relocating more than 2,200 German specialists during one night in 1946 in secrecy. Over 2,000 Army personnel examined 5,000 German targets with high priority information and research surrounding rubber, oil, armored military, V-2 rockets, aircraft, equipment, radios, chemicals, medicine, you name it. They wanted that science. The US Joint Chiefs of Staff established the first secret recruitment program called Operation Overcast in 1945. Representatives included the Army Director of Intelligence, the Chief of Naval Intelligence, the Chief of Air Staff, and the State Department. 1945, Operation Overcast was renamed Operation Paperclip by the officers who would attach a paperclip to the folders of classified rocket knowledge whom were crucial to the Americans. President Truman officially approved Operation Paperclip and expanded it to include 1,000 German scientists under temporary limited military custody. Basically, they were now citizens if they played ball. I can see why they kept it a secret for so long. The NASA Distinguished Service Medal is the highest award bestowed by them, and after more than 2 decades of service, 4 Operation Paperclip members were awarded the medals in 1969 for their research surrounding the space race. If you're unfamiliar with the works of Annie Jacobsen, I recommend you check her out for some more information.
Coming in at number 5, we have secret experiments. This is nothing new. The government has been up to all sorts of secret experiments. If we go back through the 20th century, we have things like MK Ultra. This is when the CIA and the American government was obsessed with mind control and trying to find some way to implement it into warfare and interrogations. Some of the things they would do is take someone and put them in isolation for an undetermined amount of time and see if they would break mentally and start giving up information. They would mostly do this on prisoners that had no idea they were part of an experiment. Wow, that definitely sounds ethical, but that isn't even the most notorious part. What the experiment is really famous for is when the CIA would use LSD, that is a hallucinatory drug known as acid, to try and control people's minds in interrogations. They would give people doses of LSD without them knowing and put them under extreme questioning. Once again, they would do this to people who had no idea they were being experimented on. Eventually, the tests were all stopped and a lot of the information on the studies was released to the public. Some people think that this was just a last attempt at trying to find a way to control people, but other people are convinced that the government was successful in finding some way to take control over people's minds. So this begs the question, what kind of secret studies or experiments is the government conducting now? We think that they have learned their lesson from their mistakes, but it's the government. They are the masters of doing things that cost tons of money and that are extremely unethical. This is their bread and butter, baby. They could be doing tests on artificial intelligence without us knowing, working on making a living, thinking AI that has the ability to feel emotions and make complex decisions. Not only would this be terrifying, but the tests they could be running could be seen as some sort of torture in the future. Coming in at number 4, we have receiving data from social media companies. When it comes to data and information, we know that the government can't be trusted. They will find some way to get your stuff. It doesn't matter what your data is. Do you spend 2 hours a day looking at memes? The government wants to know about it. Do you have a habit of ordering McDonald's delivered right to your house even though you live 5 minutes away from the nearest Donnie's? The government wants to know about that too. Am I just sharing with you my bad tendencies that I should probably stop because they are holding me back? That could be a possibility too. But we already know that the NSA was looking at all your phone calls, all of your emails, and collecting all of your data back in 2013, and you think just because we caught them they were gonna stop? No way! Then Facebook got caught for selling data, and you don't think that other major companies aren't doing the same thing? Data is the most valuable thing on the planet right now, and there's no way that the government doesn't have their hands in the pot somewhere. That was the big problem with TikTok. It's Chinese owned, so America didn't want their data flying out to another country from the American people, but they are perfectly fine with it staying in the hands of the American people, probably because they're getting a piece of it. Coming at number 3, we have secret weapons, especially in America where the military funding is through the roof. Who knows what sort of technological advancements are happening behind closed doors? I don't think we will ever know what's going on until they want us to know. Places like Area 51 have stayed secret forever, and even when there was supposed to be a massive raid, which just turned out to be a bunch of people hanging out in the desert for a good laugh, none of the secrets have leaked out. Well, not none of them. There are some people who have claimed to work at Area 51 and have leaked some secrets. Most famously is Bob Lazar. If you follow the content I'm a part of, then you will for sure have heard me talk about Bob Lazar before. He is known as the man who worked at Area 51 and then started spilling the beans about what was going on there. There's a documentary about him on Netflix, and he has been on Rogan talking about some of the stuff that he worked on. Now, Bob has never claimed to work on any sort of weaponry. He says that all the stuff he worked on had to do with flight. He was working on a new type of spaceship that can move faster than anything we could comprehend. Basically, the way he described it is these secret spaceships use what's called a gravity reactor, which bends gravity around them that lets a ship move at an insane speed. It's a form of propulsion that was thought to be impossible, and he says that it's not only possible, but it uses something called element 115 to happen. happen. This is the substance that is used in the gravity reactor. Even though Bob has never worked on anything to do with weaponry, he did mention that there was some sort of evidence of weaponry testing and design using element 115. What on earth could that look like? What does a gravity gun or gravity bomb do to a person or an entire city? Bob worked with the government in Area 51 back in the 80s, so who knows what kind of advancements they have made since then. The American government could be hiding a weapon that could have the destructive capabilities to take out an entire country or blow up the moon. Or if they could shoot nukes faster than the speed of light, there wouldn't be a lot of time to get shelter and protect your people if that gets fired at you. Well, let's hope we never have to experience something like that, because I don't want the world ending right now. There's also things like Project HARP, a system of radio towers in Alaska that apparently have the ability to control the weather and even cause things like powerful earthquakes. Imagine you could weaponize the weather, cause lightning and hail to decimate your enemy. It would be like they're in the movie Geostorm. You could make the terrain too cold to fight on, or make the weather too erratic for your enemy to grow crops to feed their troops. They would quickly be bending the knee to your godlike power. There's also rumors that Project HARP has the ability to send out a low frequency signal to a large area and cause an entire population to pass out. You could incapacitate an entire city. Alright, coming in at number 2 we have aliens. I mean, we were just talking about Area 51, so it only makes sense that we talk about aliens for a little bit. The government has known about aliens for a long time, and they just started telling us. They need to open the door and let us know all the things about these little green dudes walking around, because I want to become their friend and go on a crazy space adventure. Now, if you want to go really deep, you could say that aliens are running the government, and that is why they won't spill the beans. But that's not the vibe we're going for today. What I'm going to focus on is the fact that we know the government has been hiding the truth about aliens, because they recently declassified a lot of alien files and started showing us UFOs and the fact that they are real. They even released government footage of a UFO. There was a legit flying saucer caught on camera just floating around, and no one reacted at all. Mind you, the world was kind of on fire at that point with all the protests and coronavirus, but it's still crazy and no one cared. But here's what I'm thinking. There's no way that they told us everything. There's no way that the little bit of footage and documents that were shown to us was everything they have to offer. And the stuff that they're hiding is probably the best stuff. I bet they have a full alien language mapped out that you can learn on Rosetta Stone.
Coming in at number 5 we have Area 51, a classic birthplace of conspiracies about aliens and UFOs. But do you know what actually goes on inside those highly secured walls? Located 120 miles northwest of Las Vegas, the base is a government-controlled piece of land. The ground space of Area 51 is so big that it's around the size of Connecticut. Surrounding the base there is very little around it, far from modern living styles, and even lacks cell reception. And this is by design, as in 1954 the CIA was asked by the president to find a secret location and found what they were looking for here. Civilians are prohibited to enter the grounds of Area 51, with threats of a fine and imprisonment if civilians trespass or take photos of the building. In 2013, the CIA approved the release of declassified documents about the history of the site. This was the first time the US government acknowledged the existence of Area 51, even though it has been in operation since 1955. Area 51 is shrouded in mystery. According to ex-government sources, this mysterious area of Nevada is mostly a test site for experimental military technology, like the SR-71 Blackbird airplane, and now a secret extraterrestrial testing facility. Additionally, Area 51 is home to the nation's overhead surveillance program. It's where some of the most important spying aircraft in American history was assembled, tested, and ultimately sent out on missions. Experts say it's likely remains an area for the Air Force and US spy agencies to develop the next generation of aircraft and other weapons of war. The conspiracies around Area 51 in relation to examining aliens are due to the multiple reports of reported UFOs around the grounds of Area 51. Though these weren't UFOs, they were the aircrafts the government was testing on the grounds. That being said, since it has forever been locked away from the public, it's not for certain exactly what goes on within the walls of Area 51. But the fact that it was declassified 6 60 years after it began operations is a bit scary if you ask me. In at number 4 we have John Lennon's CIA case. John Lennon is a pop culture icon and is best known for being one of the members of the Beatles, though the Federal Bureau of Investigation considered Lennon a threat. This is because the government wasn't too keen on a foreigner spreading anti-war, anti-Nixon messages to the rather large counterculture movement in the United States. Thus, the FBI did what the FBI does best and kept detailed surveillance records of Lennon's activities while actively trying to deport him. The FBI suspected Lennon would disrupt proceedings in the 1972 presidential election, where Nixon hoped to be re-elected, with a planned tour complete with voter registration efforts and anti-war protests. To help stop him, the Immigration and Nationalization Service, which would later be absorbed into the Department of Homeland Security, began deportation proceedings against Lennon. It appears that their preemptive efforts worked. Lennon never did the tour and Nixon was re-elected. It took 14 years for the FBI to release their files on John Lennon. Historian John Wiener spent those years fighting to gain access to the FBI's secret files on John Lennon. At first, the FBI refused to release many of the documents, saying their release would endanger national security. Wiener's Freedom of Information case went all the way to the Supreme Court before the FBI agreed to settle. In those files, it seems that their biggest concern was Lennon's association with radical anti-war activities, and his ability to influence voters to vote against the Nixon administration in the coming election. Therefore, the CIA led to the conclusion that his visa should be terminated in the interest of national security. John didn't go down without a fight though and fought this claim with lawyers. When that didn't work, the CIA tried to deport Lennon, this time by catching him for narcotics, even though the FBI doesn't enforce possession of narcotics charges as it is a state offense. That being said, the CIA proceeded to give the Miami FBI office a discreet porter to arrange a drug bust. However, all of Lennon's files were destroyed due to what they claimed to be part of a routine file destruction procedure, so this can't be known for certain. Coming in at number 3 we have the Bohemian Club. The Bohemian Club is an elite invitation-only social club founded in San Francisco in 1872. The Bohemian Club began renting the campground for an annual retreat before purchasing it outright in 1899. But what actually happens at the club? Well, in June and July, some of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the country flock to the Redwood Grove in Sonoma County, California. They're all members of this so-called Bohemian Club, a private all-male club that's counted US presidents, military officials, artists, and business leaders as members. Over the years, a number of those gathered club members have happened to be US presidents. Because of its secrecy, strange ceremonies, and elite body of members, the Bohemian Club has long been the subject of sinister online rumors, with a number of journalists trying to infiltrate the campground just to try and get a glimpse of what actually goes on in the camp. The journalist Alex Shumatov was caught and detained for trespassing. Filmmaker Alex Jones had more success with his infiltration in 2000, where he entered the camp with a hidden camera. Jones was able to capture a ceremony called the Cremation of the Care. During this ceremony, members were seen wearing costumes and cremating a coffin before a 40-foot owl. While the reported Philip Weiss snuck into the Bohemian Grove in 1987 and spent a few days mingling with the rich and powerful. A former dining server described the club as a place where the elite could engage in behavior that doesn't usually fly for people of their stature in the regular world. In the 21st century, the Bohemian Club maintained its reputation for being highly exclusive, with a predominantly Caucasian membership composed of the richest and often most politically conservative men in the United States. Coming in at number 2 we have Walt Disney working for the FBI. Who would have thought that the founder of Mickey Mouse and the Disney Empire served as an FBI informant? From 1940 until his death in 1966, Walt Disney secretly served in the FBI. Walt Disney served as a secret informer for the Los Angeles office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. According to documents that have come to light about this secret arrangement, Disney was tasked with reporting on the activities of Hollywood actors, writers, producers, directors, technicians, and union activists suspected of political subversion. At this time, communism was on the rise around the world and American officials were concerned about these ideals spreading into society. The documents report that during a strike of animators at the Disney studio in 1941, Walt Disney publicly publicly accused the strike leaders of communistic agitation. When Disney, whose right-wing leanings were well known, testified before the House of Committee on Un-American Activities in Washington, he named several of the animators who had led the strike as communists. In return for Disney's information, the director of the bureau allowed Disney to film in the FBI headquarters in Washington. For his part, Disney allowed the director access to Disney scripts and make changes in movies and episodes of the Mickey Mouse Club television show. Due to Disney providing the bureau with information and doing such a good job, he was named Full Special Agent in Charge Contact in 1954. This title was given to those who were trusted informers that is able to provide transportation and equipment, as well as public relations services to the bureau. And finally, in at number 1 we have they investigated ESPs. The extrasensory perception, also known as ESP, is considered a sixth sense, including claimed reception of information not gained through the recognized physical senses but sensed with the mind. According to the FBI Vault, ESP is considered a perception of information about events beyond what may be discerned through the 5 physical senses or deduced from past experience or knowledge. The FBI's interest in ESP goes back to 1957 when the bureau was contacted by a man called Foose, who claimed that he could teach the blind to see. While CIA was not impressed by the tricks of Foose, it wouldn't be the end of the agency's or the FBI's interest in psychic and paranormal phenomena. From there, the FBI once spent time and money investigating extrasensory perception. There has also been reports of experimenting with ways to weaponize people with ESP. This was a highly secret program during the 1970s by the government that took place in research labs in California. The bureau attempted to look at the phenomenon from a rational and logical viewpoint, using cold hard science and math much like the CIA and DIA later would. In their attempt to construct a laboratory test to objectively measure psychic phenomena, the results of the laboratory tests that they held remain unknown, as the files were excluded from the FBI's release. Considering the interest of the Army and CIA in the FBI's psychic research, whatever their results were likely helped justify the future course of the intelligence community's research into psychic perception. Based on concerns ESP could be used as part of an international spying, the FBI spent more than 3 years looking into the phenomenon before they concluded there was no scientific support for their concerns.
Number 5 on this list is secret laws. Now, I wish I could be more specific about which secret laws I'm referring to, but if I knew that, then they wouldn't be secret in the first place. I wasn't actually aware of this, but the government of the United States, and I'm assuming other governments around the globe as well, can pass secret laws. These are laws that are specifically not revealed to the public and are just on a need-to-know basis. Full-on legal laws that are now put into practice are getting secretly signed and passed by the higher-ups, and we have no idea what they could even be. This could literally range from making the word ketchup illegal to, I don't know, making it totally legal to steal a car on the 30th of August if there's a full moon out. Alright, so obviously those are wildly extreme examples, and I doubt that those things are actually happening, but you get my point. In America, these laws are called Presidential Policy Directives, which is a fancy way of saying that it's an executive order from the president, which can be revealed to the public if they wanted to, or can remain secret. These don't happen in just crazy times of crisis either, they happen a lot more frequently than you may believe. During his time in office, President Obama signed 43 different PPDs, and to this day, there are 16 of them that the public literally has no knowledge of whatsoever. That is a lot of laws that are just floating around that we literally don't know anything about. Now, one has to imagine that these probably don't concern the public and has to do with other secretive government stuff, but what secret government stuff does it concern? Secret deals going down with other countries? Covert missions that the public can't know about? Anything regarding extraterrestrials? This is all on the table with these PPDs, and we may honestly never know. A fun and also scary statistic is that President Reagan, when he was in office, passed at least 325 PPDs. That is just an insane amount of laws that we don't know anything about. It also begs the question, is this too much power for the president to have? Comment your thoughts down below about these things. Honestly curious to know what you guys think. Number 4 on this list is criminal hackers. One would think that hacking should be something that the government would excel at, that they would be pumping money into hacking programs to train people to become elite at that skill. This actually isn't the case though, and the FBI isn't as good as they'd like. This is why when something needs to be hacked or something needs to be protected from hacking, they enlist the help of criminal hackers. People who've been convicted of hacking related crimes and are now behind bars. This is a win for hackers because if they help the FBI, then they'll receive a lighter sentence. This also isn't the first time the American government has looked to criminals for support. How about Operation Paperclip? After the Second World War, the United States government reached out to German scientists and brought them in to help them build the atomic bomb. Now they're doing something similar with convicted criminals to help them with other things. Obviously, the government doesn't like to talk about this too much because enlisting criminals doesn't make the public feel too great, especially if you're the one who was targeted by said criminal. If I was the American government, or any government for that matter, I'd be taking some of that military funding of theirs and tossing it into hacking. It really does seem like the way of the future. Number 3 on this list is Churchill's secret UFOs. Winston Churchill is known for his overwhelming leadership of the British people during one of their most trying times, World War II. What he often isn't known for though, because he made sure that this never got out, was his deep fascination with UFOs. Files that weren't released until 2010 actually revealed that the British government under Winston Churchill were more than fascinated with the presence of UFOs and aliens in our universe. In fact, they had a task force that met weekly to discuss such things as how to contact or capture said UFOs. There are thousands and thousands of documents that were released detailing just an obscene amount of things in relation to aliens and UFOs from the British government. We now understand that this was a massive operation for the British government and Churchill, but at the time, nobody knew about it at all. This was because Churchill apparently didn't want to cause any panic for the people and kept all of this info completely under wraps. I find it interesting how invested they were in this alien and UFO narrative though. I think it's safe to assume that these days most governments are looking into extraterrestrial life, but Churchill had his people deep down the rabbit hole. This also kind of begs the question, well, is there still more to the story that we don't know about? I wouldn't be surprised if sometime from now more documents are revealed that potentially point to Churchill and the British government having some encounters with said extraterrestrials that we were never privy to. Number 2 on this list is lost plutonium. Okay, so this one is honestly just negligent. Charlotte Children details what happens by writing, "The United States and India came together for a joint mission in the 1960s that, if successful, would monitor China's nuclear development. The goal was to install radioactive isotope Pu-238 powered sensors, but hazardous conditions forced the team to evacuate the Himalayas before the installation was complete. When they returned, the sensors had vanished. No one has tracked down the plutonium devices, but locals believe that they are still active in the area and are responsible for melting mountain caps that are causing massive floods." Alright, so just think about that, guys. The government literally just lost a bunch of extremely dangerous plutonium and then was like, "Ah, shucks, I guess we'll just leave it then," and then left the Himalayan mountains in a state of disarray. They're now causing major negative environmental impacts on the mountains and those who live around them. Not to mention the entire other aspect of this. What if someone we don't want finding a bunch of dangerous plutonium found a bunch of dangerous plutonium? Plutonium can be used to make nuclear weapons, and having some rando just pick this thing up in the Himalayas probably isn't the best thing for society. This is why this failed venture hasn't been talked about too much, and the government likes to keep it under wraps. Next time though, guys, let's try to be more careful what we do with this super dangerous, super radioactive chemical, I think. Number 1 on this list is Project Sunshine. This thing was just totally messed up and is truly almost unbelievable. Wikipedia writes, "Project Sunshine was a series of research studies that began in 1953 to ascertain the impact of radioactive fallout on the world's population. The project was initially kept secret and only became known publicly in 1956. Commissioned jointly by the United States Atomic Energy Commission and USAF Project RAND, Sunshine sought to examine the long-term effects of nuclear radiation on the biosphere due to repeated nuclear detonations of increasing yield. With the conclusion from Project Gabriel that radioactive isotope SR90 represented the most serious threat to human health from nuclear fallout, Project Sunshine sought to measure the global dispersion of SR90 by measuring its concentration in the tissues and bones of the dead. Of particular interest was tissue from the young, whose developing bones have the highest propensity to accumulate SR90 and thus the highest susceptibility to radiation damage. Sunshine elicited a great deal of controversy when it was revealed that many of the remains sampled were utilized without prior permission from the deceased or from relatives of the dead, which wasn't known until many years later." Okay, so let's just go over that last part again, guys. People didn't know that the government was testing on dead bodies of their loved ones. The American government was literally stealing the dead bodies of their citizens, prioritizing the bodies of the young when they did it, and then releasing a horribly radioactive chemical around them to see what would happen. And also, who the hell named this? Project Sunshine? What the hell is possibly bright and sunshiny about this? This is just messed up, man. It's no wonder the government wanted to keep this a secret. They knew that this was horribly wrong and bad. I guess we just need to cross our fingers and hope that something like this isn't happening secretly under our noses right now.
Number 5, David Grush. If you are an UFO enthusiast at all, you have definitely heard the name David Grush lately. David Grush is a former intelligence officer. He's a US Air Force veteran with ties to UFO development and research, and he's been loudly blowing the whistle on possible UFO activity inside the US, boldly claiming that not only does the US have proof of extraterrestrial life, but that the US is storing alien crafts for their own purpose. Last week, Grush made headlines when he claimed that the US government concealed a non-human craft from Congress, and Grush is trying to make people aware of this story. He says they've got evidence of deceased agents and alien officers through crash site retrieval, explaining when you recover something that's landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots, and believe it or not, it's true. Now, Grush claims that he never personally saw any non-human evidence himself, but knows enough people within the program to confide that it's real, saying he knew several intelligence officers involved in the crash site retrieval program. He added too that there is a decades-long competition with political adversaries to retrieve the materials from crash sites to reverse engineer the crafts for defense advantages. Now, it's an incredible claim, and if it's true, it'd be the biggest story of the century. It'd be this moment of truth. So is the truth finally coming out? Of course, Grush isn't the only person blowing the whistle lately, claiming that the US has impressive technology hidden away. An unnamed whistleblower claims that a UFO recovered by the US military is so advanced that its technology doesn't make sense at all, claiming this craft distorts space-time and that outside it's only about 30 meters wide, but inside is the size of a football stadium. Now, this story was relayed from the whistleblower to a lawyer, one Daniel Sheehan, who is a lawyer who specializes in aiding whistleblowers. There really is a guy for everything there, isn't there? Story goes is that the crash site recovery crew found this craft 30 feet embedded in the earth. They sent an agent inside and discovered that it's like the TARDIS, saying that it was much, much bigger on the inside and that he was disoriented and nauseous after stepping inside and discovering the craft was impossibly large. Wow, maybe, you know what? Alien crafts, we could use those as cheap housing, fill a lot of people inside if they're bigger on the inside. Maybe a possible solution to a housing crisis? I just solved it. You're welcome. And if you're looking for way more scary footage of UFOs, aliens, all sorts of conspiracy stuff like that, you better believe the Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. Click on through, make sure you ring that little bell so you don't miss a single video of ours, but do that at the end of this video if you wouldn't mind, because I got 4 more Pentagon secrets coming for you right now. Number 4, Operation Paperclip. In the waning years of World War II, around 1945, the US was starting to worry they were going to need an edge against the Soviet Union in the coming future, and they wanted to take every advantage they could find for technological advancements. Also, put a little pin in that, make a note of how many times the sentence "the US wanted an edge over the Soviets in the future" comes up in this video. So they would do anything they could to get advancements, even if that meant picking some advancements from unbelievably dubious sources. This operation was called Operation Paperclip, and it was a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were all taken from a certain National Socialist Party in Germany that tried to take over most of Europe, if you know the one that I'm referring to. When large numbers of German scientists began to be discovered in April of 1945, the US set up a few makeshift detention centers in Paris and Frankfurt. Now, this early draft of the project was called Operation Overdraft, and the idea was that it was going to help end the war against the Japanese and immediately benefit the post-World War II world. In November 1945, Overcast got renamed to Operation Paperclip in a reference to how officers would attach a paperclip to the folder of rocket scientists and experts that they wanted to export to America. Now, in its conception, the project's idea and goal was this fear that if America didn't take all these very morally gray scientists, someone else would have, fearing that they would flee to Argentina or Egypt, which had known to be sympathetic to members of that party. The Soviets actually had a very similar project to this, mirroring it, calling it Operation Oswiecim, occurring during 1946. Everybody wanted them. These scientists scientists all blended into American life very well. They took to McDonald's, they got themselves cushy jobs at lofty positions, and a number of them went to NASA. A great deal of the advancements we have in rocket and spaceflight technology can be very, very directly traced back to members of this project. Isn't that fun? Think about how all-American it is to get to the moon. Number 3, the Denver Airport secrets. Ooh. A group as secretive as the Illuminati needs an amazing hideout, right? You know, somewhere cool where you can pull the strings from behind the scenes, something like the Bat Cave, hidden in plain sight, but hidden enough from the public eye that no one would uncover them. Now, there have been several theories over the years as to where a cabal like this could be concealing themselves, but my definite favorite conspiracy is that they use the Denver Airport as a base of operations. The Denver Airport is just rife for conspiracy theory on its own, and I have to admit, even as a very large skeptic, there's enough in here to have me rubbing my chin in wonder. First and foremost, there's a giant terrifying horse statue that looks like a stallion Satan would ride into battle more than anything you'd expect to see on an airport. It's got red glowing eyes and it sets off a few eyebrows and then gets a million times weirder when you learn that the creator of the statue was crushed to death by this statue, meaning this horse has taken a life before. Now, sometimes a scary horse is just a scary horse, but it's what's inside the Denver Airport that's got people so confused. The airport features maybe the strangest mural to ever grace a public building. It's a triptych of paintings depicting what seems to be an apocalypse. Soldiers in black and green gas masks are destroying the world with viruses and raising their swords to people and bringing out a new age. And look, even if you're not a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracist, even if you are the most rational person in the world, you have to admit these are strange artistic choices for an airport. We could do an entire video on the Denver Airport and its secrets and mysteries, and we would still have room left over. I would love to do that, just putting that out into the world. Underneath the Denver Airport, there runs a massive system of tunnels that's use are unknown. Why would an airport need these? I'm sure there's actually a pretty good reason for that, but there are some who theorize this is where the Illuminati meets or where they transport sensitive cargo. You know, they put the Ark of the Covenant from the end of Indiana Jones through here. And finally, there's a seal on top of the Denver Airport for a time capsule with Freemason symbols all over it, and a note indicating that one of the contributors to the construction was the New World Airport Commission, an organization that does not appear to exist. If all of this is setting off your blinking lights, it's understandable. There is a reason this building is so popular for countless conspiracy theories. But is it home to a secret shadow government? Only that horse knows, and I'm not getting near him to ask. Number 2, Project Mockingbird. A very popular conspiracy theory is that the government subliminally splices in messages in the media to influence people to get you to go see the latest live-action Disney remake. Well, what if I told you that might not be the craziest thing in the world, since the CIA tried pretty hard to do this? It was called Project Mockingbird, allegedly. A CIA program that aimed to influence and control media organizations and journalists for propaganda purposes. Allegedly. Project Mockingbird has never been officially proven, but come on. Do you really think that the CIA is going to admit they're going to be like, yeah, we were trying to influence the media and mind control you guys all secretly? Oops, sorry, you caught us. The project allegedly began in the 1950s, at a time when the US was in a race against the Soviets in just about everything, and they weren't going to let the Russians out-propaganda them. They were going to get good old apple pie American values subliminally messaged to you. Under Project Mockingbird, the CIA allegedly sought to recruit and cultivate relationships with journalists, publishers, and media organizations, and their objective was to shape the content, tone, and direction of news coverage, making sure that it aligned with the government's values perfectly. But again, like I said, allegedly, that's a total conspiracy, and definitely not something any government would ever do to you. It is definitely known that the CIA had relationships with certain journalists and media organizations. They used methods like providing information to certain journalists, favorable treatment to sympathetic journalists, and these interactions might not have been as blatant string pulling, but they could have influenced media coverage indirectly. But again, unclear what extent was real and what is being blown out of proportion, but You know, the idea that the government could be controlling the media is pretty horrifying. But if the US government wants to pay me to get some subliminal messaging into top 5 scary videos, just give me a DM, guys. I'm totally willing to be part of the propaganda machine. And number 1, Project Stargate. When you go through records of declassified CIA programs, the things you uncover are both unbelievably shocking, so much that it almost loops around to being mundane. The CIA has done so many insane real things that it makes conspiracies about the CIA seem kind of subdued. You know, you hear about the CIA trying to turn cats into listening devices. That sounds like a joke. That was real. Have you heard of Project Stargate? Well, let me enlighten you. It was a top secret CIA project that aimed to investigate the potential of psychic super soldiers to train US soldiers to be able to see things outside their mind or kill targets using their psychic abilities. They tried to do stranger things. They tried to make a little 11. The program was inspired by reports that the Soviet Union was conducting research in psychic phenomena. And wow, well, come on. You don't want to be the only secret intelligence agency on the block that doesn't have psychic super soldiers. You'll look ridiculous. So the CIA sought out individuals who had purported psychic abilities. These people were called remote viewers, and the trainers would conduct experiments where these remote viewers would make claims about targets in separate rooms, and then an analyst would analyze how accurate they were. This is a real thing the US government was funding. The CIA and Department of Defense were signing the checks on this program. They really believed in this until they didn't, because over time they noticed a concerning lack of results. The CIA eventually decided to defund the project and declassify the documents, where it became a subject of mass fascination, I think, from people finding out that at one point the government was using tax dollars to try and fund psychic super soldiers, and that's not the plot of an 80s like Paul Verhoeven movie. That's a real thing that happened. It was, however, the direct inspiration for the plot of The Men Who Stare at Goats, which is a super underrated kind of Coen Brothers-esque indie movie starring Ewan McGregor. Could not recommend that enough, but even that does not do justice for how crazy real CIA programs are. Look them up on your own time, please. Do your homework after this video if I can get any message through you. Number 5, Project Acoustic Kitty. Have you ever tried to train a cat? I have too, and let me tell you from experience, it is not particularly easy. I can barely get them to agree to use like a litter box, let alone complete a task. But that very well could be because I am just one man and I don't have the government funding and might of the US military behind me. I'm sure if I had a little government funding, I could get these cats jumping through hoops and waiting more than 5 minutes to start screaming once their food dish is empty. So this is Project Acoustic Kitty, a CIA program that proposed the transformation of house cats into next generation cybernetically enhanced super spies. No, really. It sounds like it's the plot to a direct-to-VHS kids movie, but it was a real project. A team of animal behaviorists worked alongside Robin Michelson, who was one of the inventors of the human cochlear implant, with the hope of making one for cats. They would wire a cat with a battery, a compartment in its rib cage, and a wire running all the way to its inner ear. They believed they could control the cat's movements through ultrasonic sound, and they could use a transmitter also implanted in the cat to listen in on conversations. I don't know what kind of conversations they think a cat is getting up to, but cats mostly just lay in the sun. I feel like that's one of the bigger problems with this project. Now, whether or not this actually got past the drawing board and they actually RoboCopped a cat is up for some debate. An ex-CIA officer grimly claims, and kind of hilariously in the darkest way, that the original Acoustic Kitty was struck by a taxi after they took him out of a van, and he took the Rainbow Road up to heaven to spy for the CIA on angels. A different report claims that the original cat lived out a happy life, he pursued journalism, and then was found dead in his apartment after publishing some anti-CIA sentiment. That's just a joke, don't look that up. Now, the only declassified document regarding the project is a redacted memorandum titled Views on Trained Cats, and it references this: cats cannot be similarly trained to approach, and then redacted. That's all we know, really. To quote Charlie Kelly from Always Sunny, cats do not abide by the laws of nature, D. Anyone who owned a cat should have been able to tell the CIA that teaching them to do anything that serves anyone but themselves is a lost cause. And if you're looking for more funny videos about cats, we don't really have a lot of that. That's elsewhere on the internet. But if you're looking for scary things, cryptids, conspiracies, ghouls, goblins, aliens, true crime, fake crime, just about anything freaky above the sun and below it, we've got lots of that in spades. So click on through, hit subscribe, and hit that little bell, and make sure you don't miss a single scream. But do that at the end of this video for me, would you kindly? We got way more secrets coming up for you. Number 1. Number 4, Henry Shields' flying saucer. And one of these should probably be about aliens, right? The rest of them are gonna be like secret CIA projects and stuff, but I feel like I should include just one alien thing to keep it a little fun and fresh and flirty, and also because I know you love the aliens. I know what drives the clicks around here. So let's talk a little about a declassified document regarding unidentified flying saucers coming to us from 1976. Captain Henry Shields of the US Air Force began his report by typing, "Sometime in his career, each pilot can be expected to encounter strange, unusual happenings which will never be adequately or entirely explained by logic or subsequent investigation. This story will be filed away and possibly forgotten, but it makes for interesting and possibly disturbing reading," which is a great way of prefacing, letting you know that whatever he's about to talk about is insane. The account begins describing a clear morning. The Iranian Air Force received a series of calls of unknown airborne objects described as bird-like or flying saucer-like, or like a brightly lit helicopter. Now, nothing should have been in the airspace at the time, and so an F-4 fighter jet was dispatched. As the plane followed, it made contact with a flying saucer-like object, and they lost all communications with ground control until they moved away from this strange object. They sent a second F-4 fighter after it, but that also experienced a power loss when it tried to fire at it, as if there was some sort of like tech field, some EMP field blocking them. The crews reported they saw something detach from the saucer and fly towards the plane at top speed, but luckily was avoided. Now, it's unclear what happened, but the saucer escaped, and the crews of the planes reported seeing something land from the UFO, lighting up an area of the lake. They investigated at a nearby residence where the owners claimed they heard loud noises and very bright lights. So what was it? What was it they encountered then? It was far too early for this to be any sort of drone technology, really, and there's not really many other options for me to say. I think it was an alien, and who am I to say that that's not true? Number 3, Operation Paperclip. Oh, this one's a doozy. In the waning years of World War II, around 1945, the US was beginning to worry that they needed an edge against the Soviet Union in the coming future, and wanted to take every single advantage they could find at their disposal for advancements in technology, even if that meant picking up from some seriously dubious sources. It was called Operation Paperclip, and it was a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from Germany's National Socialist Party to come work for the United States and forget about all of that other stuff. When large numbers of German scientists began to be discovered in April of 1945, the US set up a few overnight makeshift interrogation centers in Paris and in Frankfurt. This early draft of the project was called Operation Overcast, and this initial idea was that this was going to help end the war against the Japanese, and it would immediately benefit post-World War II research. Eventually, the project got renamed from Overcast to Paperclip in reference to how the officers would attach a little paperclip to the folders of the rocket experts they wanted to pluck and bring over to America. Now, in its conception, the project's first goal and idea behind it was this thinking that somebody had to take these scientists, right? And if America didn't pluck all of these morally gray scientists, somebody else would have. And they feared that they would have fled to Argentina or Egypt, which had been known to be sympathetic to German National Socialism. And I guess it was better if they were there where they could be observed than somewhere else where they could do who knows what. The Soviets actually had a similar project to this idea, mirroring it, calling it Operation Ozofekham, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, occurring during 1946, and that's a whole different video. Now, these scientists blended into American life, and they got themselves some cushy jobs at lofty positions. You would not believe some of the places some of these guys went. A number of them went to NASA. Here's a terrible fact for you. A great deal of the advancements and knowledge we have about like rockets and spacesuits and spaceflight technology can all be directly traced to members of the project and former members of a certain nationalist socialist party. Number 2, MK Ultra. If you're like one of the 1.4 billion people who've turned into Netflix for Stranger Things, you're probably a big fan of all the wacky stuff that goes on in Hawkins. Aliens from another dimension, Steve Harrington's hair, psychic super soldiers. It's fun to see such fantastical concepts on the screen, you know? That kind of stuff only exists in TV. And of course in the grim reality where the CIA really did try to develop brainwashing, mind control, and astral projection technology. Now, the most infamous among them by far is Project MK Ultra, sometimes known as Project Monarch. To begin to even truly scrape the surface of this subject, we need a lot more time than the 2-minute window we've got here, but we can cover the absolute basics about this super duper incredibly very real thing the American government was was very involved in. Look it up after this video, please. I can't discuss everything, but participants of the MK Ultra trials were put through unimaginable torment. Electrocution, unknowingly dosing subjects with illicit narcotics. Now, many MK Ultra documents have been destroyed over the years by the CIA's direction, but what documents that have been declassified gave us a lot of insight into the program. See, the CIA was worried again that the Soviets were making better leaps in technology over them and were winning all sorts of landmark races. So they were doing everything they could to get their edge over the Soviets, like we talked about in the last point. And one of these forays was interrogation technology. They believed that with the aid of certain illicit substances, some mental gymnastics, they could outright dominate and control another human being's brain. The project's goal outright was stated to enhance the abilities of individuals to withstand coercion, produce shock, confusion, and amnesia, to create materials which will cause the victim to age faster, slower, to promote illogical thinking, and impulsiveness to the point where the recipient would be discredited. So it's not quite 11 and the Upside Down, but it is just as cruel. Now, interestingly, a plot point in the show was that 11's mother was kind of cruelly experimented on. She didn't really know what she was signing up for at all and was left ravaged by the experience afterwards. This is really not that different from what actually happened, where a grand majority of the test subjects for MK Ultra Project Monarch were people like homeless people, convicts, or people with nowhere else left to turn who were willing to turn a blind eye to some seriously dubious experimentation for very little in the way of compensation. And number 1, the Gateway experience. Now, as I just said, this was far from the only bizarre mental training the CIA ever dipped their fingers in. Have you ever seen the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats? Probably not. It's an indie movie from the early 2000s. It's great. George Clooney and Obi-Wan Kenobi is in. I forget his real name, Ewan McGregor. The movie talks about a secret division of the US Army that was experimenting with expanding their consciousness. Sounds pretty far out and groovy, right, man? Well, enter the Gateway experience. It sounds like weaponized hippies, and it kind of was. The goal was that subjects would be able to harness the full extent of their brain, and that with enough practice, subjects would be able to release the control of their consciousness from this mortal shell, from this meat prison that keeps us all, and release us out into these planes of existence that you and I are just far too feeble to ever understand. Now, the final landmark for this project, the final idea, was mental time travel, which sounds wild, but I don't know when you guys are going to realize you can't make up stuff weirder than actual things the CIA has done. This idea is that once your consciousness existed outside of meat space, you could access your memories and relive them and view them from a third-person perspective of an outsider. You'd be able to take in stock of your surroundings and gather data and intel no one else could have. So, you know, right now, I'm looking into a camera, I'm talking into this thing, but later on in the future, I can imagine myself and see myself behind the camera, watch myself making all these mistakes from a different perspective. Now, I'd love to be able to explain the intricacies of what this project involved, but I only have so much time to do, so please do some homework after this video if you're interested in this subject. It's really fascinating. The idea was that with a melange of binaural beats, guided meditation, this would affect the flow of your blood, alter your heartbeat, and start to awaken the brain in the ways we don't use it, get that third eye going. They said if your brain is like a light, the process of the Gateway experience was to try to focus that light into a laser beam. So I'm sure you're eager, wondering if it worked. Officially, as far as we know, no. No one was able to mentally time travel. Project director Robert Monroe found himself frustrated that he didn't have enough time to produce results, and maintained that if he had a few more years, he would have produced something groundbreaking. Of course, that's if you believe the project was abandoned. For all we know, he could have already perfected it, gone back in time, and fixed it all the way back then. 5. Area 51. Area 51 probably has the most secretive reputation of any building in the United States, maybe even in the world. More so than the Pentagon, the White House, Chuck E. Cheese, you name it. And Area 51 didn't get this reputation because it was easy to get into. It says a lot that our best hope for finding out what was inside Area 51 was for all of us to just sort of swarm the place en masse and kind of hope that there'd be too many of us for them to stop. The thing is though, as good a plan as the Area 51 raid, the US Army kind of saw it coming. Now maybe it's because it was very heavily broadcasted and there was a Facebook event page ready to go telling everyone exactly when to meet, but it could also be because the entire surrounding area around Area 51 is completely surveyed. Not a single stone is left unseen. Armed guards patrol the grounds literally all hours of the day, and there's radars and towers watching the skies above, so no dropping in Fortnite style either. Up until 2018 actually, you could not even get a look at Area 51, as it was blocked out on Google Earth and most satellite global positioning technology. In fact, until President Obama, Area 51 was never even officially confirmed to exist, and all presidents would outright deny it. Some conspiracists suggest even there's cameras hidden all around the countryside in the rocks, keeping an eye on everything that goes on in the main road. You want to know just how serious they take the security at Area 51 if that wasn't enough to convince you? Say you land a job at Area 51, even if you're just like a janitor or a guy who refills the vending machines. Well, you have to fly into Area 51 for your commute. There's no commuter traffic, so you fly in from McCarran International. I'm guessing all the parking spaces are taken up by flying saucers. This secretive airline is called Janet Airlines, a clever acronym for just another non-existent terminal. And Janet may very well be America's most exclusive airline. Even the flight attendants who work on Janet are given top-level government clearance, just in case they overhear something they're not supposed to. You know, a man in black talking about the Type 25 Kig-Yar plasma pistol they recovered from a crash site. They know that's above their pay grade and to just keep moving and get a move on those peanuts. Now, there's no word officially on whether or not flying Janet gets you air miles, but we have to assume so. And if you're looking for more scary stories, government conspiracies, aliens, cryptids, well, we've got lots of that and then some on Top 5 Scary. Click through, subscribe, and creep on creeping on. Number 4. Roswell, New Mexico. This is probably the most infamous confirmed cover-up in government history. Mostly because the process of covering it up kind of made everyone a lot more suspicious and started a national conversation about aliens that's still going to this day. Now, it all started way back in 1947 when a rancher discovered mysterious debris on his property. It didn't look like anything he had recognized at the time, so naturally he was a bit confused. It was these lightweight paper-thin alloys that looked a bit like aluminum foil, strange rubbers, fiber optic cables. If you lived on a ranch in the 50s, it seemed like space-age technology. Now, about 2 weeks earlier, civilian pilot Kenneth Arnold had made headlines after claiming that he had seen a series of flying saucers. So in the American shared collective consciousness, flying saucers were very fresh, exciting, and new. The rancher reported it to a local sheriff, who reported it to the Air Force, and then whispers leaked out to the press, and a headline was published: RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell. And the rest was basically history. Imagine picking up the newspaper when you see a headline from a credible source that said the government had recovered a flying saucer. I kinda get where all the hysteria is coming from here. Now, where the interesting part comes in is that this little story worked out very well for the government, who were doing their level best to distract the public from the true nature of what they were working on, which would later be discovered to be Project Mogul, a nuclear bomb detection hardware. It was a top-level Black Ops secret project, launching these little weather balloons with audio recording equipment to try and detect nuclear bombs being launched in the Soviet Union. So the alien cover-up worked very well, since not a soul was talking about weather balloons, and all of the conversation instead became fascinated around whether or not the Air Force was really harboring alien corpses and flying saucer wreckage, with rumors trickling out of the woodwork like water spilling out of a burst pipe. You know, there were stories of an alien autopsy, reverse-engineered UFO crafts, the men in black knocking on people's doors. All of this talked about over a downed balloon. To this day, however, there are still those who champion that the real truth about Roswell has yet to come out, including the 45th President of the United States, who claimed he's heard some very interesting things about the 1947 incident, but didn't allude to anything further. Number 3. MK Ultra. If I have learned anything in my time diving into the unknown, is that the truth invariably is always stranger than fiction, and I have seen some stranger things. All 4 seasons of it. Love that show. Love 11, Steve Harrington and the gang. I think it's so cool that the show takes this wild sci-fi premise like the CIA trying to use narcotics to train people to be psychic super soldiers. It's very creative, and oh, they actually did that. The CIA actually did that. Oh, okay. I'm just playing. Of course I knew that. I'm a conspiracy theorist. The core backstory behind Hawkins' favorite little psychic is just as wild as the show. Starting all the way in 1953, the CIA began researching serious efforts into harnessing humanity's latent extrasensory abilities. This program was called MK Ultra, and I'm gonna tell you right now, we would need like 5 or 6 videos to even begin scratching the surface about this one. So if this is something you're at all curious about, this incredibly real thing the American government did, please look it up after this video. Now, the true extent of the program we can't really discuss, but participants were put through torturous experiences, including electrocution, unknowingly dosing subjects, and a lot more. Many documents were outright destroyed by the CIA's direction in the 70s, but what documents we do have let us into a bit of insight. The CIA was worried of the Soviets' technological advancements over them, and they were doing everything they could to try and get the edge in interrogation and data collection, and believed that with the aid of substances, mental gymnastics, they could effectively mind control another human being and make them into a tool for their will. A declassified document states outright the purpose of the MKUltra experiments was to find a way to promote and enhance the abilities of individuals to withstand coercion, as well as produce confusion and amnesia, to create materials which will cause the victim to age faster or slower, and to promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness to the point where the recipient would be discredited in public. Now, this might surprise you, but the victims of MKUltra were for the most part psychologically ravaged for the rest of their life. The CIA was pulling people literally off of the streets, experimenting on homeless, convicts, single parents, people with nowhere to turn who they know wouldn't tell anybody and who wouldn't be believed. Number 2. Project Gateway. Wow, we're gonna build off that last point. Bet you didn't think that'd be a two-part point, did you? Well, some fun terrible trivia for you. MKUltra was far from the only CIA bit of mind control and parapsychological program they were researching. And these are just the ones we know about for certain. A good skeptic knows there's probably way more we don't know about. So, mind control and being able to make a subject impressionable was one thing, but like I said, it was far from the only sensory research project. Let's talk a bit about Project Gateway. This was the CIA's attempt to harness the full extent of the brain. You've probably heard that old adage that you only use 10% of it. This was them trying to use 100, with the hopes that with enough practice, subjects would be able to release their consciousness outside of their physical body and astrally project, with the ultimate goal being full-scale mental time travel, allowing the consciousness to exist beyond the physical realm and access mental memories, experience them from a third-person perspective. If successful, subjects would theoretically be able to relive their own memories, take stock of their surroundings in new ways, and gather intel no one could have. It sounds completely made up and sci-fi. It sounds like the plot of The Men Who Stare at Goats, except that we have got it fairly documented as a real thing. Now, it's very complicated stuff, and not easy to parse into an 11-minute video, but if you want a very quick layman's idea on the experiment, the thinking was that a combination of binaural beats, intensive meditation sessions would affect the flow of the heartbeat and blood flow of the brain, and would start to awaken it. There was a line in this document that says, if your brain is like a light, the process of Project Gateway was to try and convert that light into a highly focused laser beam. So did it work? Did we have psychic super soldiers? Well, officially, no. The project director found himself frustrated that he wasn't given enough time to produce any truly impressive results from Project Gateway, but maintained that he felt if he had a few more years of solid work and very promising candidates, he could have attained his dreams of separating somebody's body from their consciousness and releasing it into the world. Now, officially, Project Gateway was disbanded, but we're on number 2 on this list, so I sincerely hope by now you've realized that there is a lot more they're not telling you. Number 1. Project Blue Book. So, Area 51, Roswell, officially, those are government conspiracies about aliens that the government outright denies. They would never actually devote any of their money and research to something as silly as aliens, right? Of course not. Unless you're an avid UFO conspiracist and you're already very aware of Project Blue Book, the Air Force program to assess and analyze the possible threat of UFOs and flying saucers. The project officially began in 1952 and was terminated in 1969. Blue Book had 2 main goals as the driving force behind it. Number 1, confirm first and foremost if UFOs, UAPs, flying saucers, whatever you want to call it, if they were a threat to American security. Number 2, scientifically analyze all UFO data to ascertain their origins. In nearly 2 decades of Project Blue Book's operation, there were over 12,618 reports filed and written. And those are just the ones reported about as part of this project. That is 12,000 official US government documents on possible alien tech and UFOs. Of these 12,000, 700 of them were found to be completely unexplainable or missing too much data to be conclusive. Now before we jump straight into pointing at the stars and hollering about flying saucers, a good number of these would end up actually being fairly rationally explained. A lot of them ended up being CIA spy plane testing, with the CIA themselves believing that the testing of the U-2 spycraft resulted in more UFO hysteria than anybody else throughout the 50s and 60s. Now the project was shut down, and three main reasons were given for its conclusion. Number 1. No UFOs reported and evaluated by the Air Force had ever given any indication of threat to national security. Number 2. There was no evidence submitted to or discovered by the Air Force that sightings categorized as unidentified represent technological developments or principles beyond the range of present-day scientific knowledge. Number 3. There has been no evidence indicating the sightings categorized as unidentified are extraterrestrial vehicles. Well, that's kind of disappointing. You're telling me in 12,000 documents you don't think any of them could maybe be aliens? Well, that was the end of the line for Project Blue Book. It would be a far cry away from the last time the government would investigate aliens. Now if you watch our videos, you no doubt have heard me lose my mind once or twice about the UAP reports, and get ready to watch me do it again. When the Pentagon confirmed very recently that they have a very active UFO program and they are still watching the skies looking for the truth just like us. The conversation about UFOs has never been more grounded, ironically enough. Never more believable, never more reasonable, never more rational. And I'm still yelling like I got a tinfoil hat on my head. We'll find the truth someday, my true believers, I know. Number 5. Getting in is impossible. Area 51 didn't get a reputation as one of the most secretive places in America because it was easy to get into. And there's a reason our best idea for getting a peek inside was to just swarm the place en masse and hope that there'd be too many of us to stop. The thing is, they saw that coming. Mostly because we broadcasted it and made Facebook groups about it and it was a big meme, but as well, the entire surrounding area around Area 51 is completely surveyed. Armed soldiers patrol the perimeter at all times, and they watch the airspace up above, so no dropping in Fortnite style either. Up until 2018, you couldn't even get a good look at it from satellite imagery since it was censored on Google Earth. Now some conspiracists say there's cameras hidden in the surrounding countryside in the rocks, and I honestly believe that. They keep an eye on everything that goes on the main road. You want to know how seriously they take security at Area 51? Those employed at Area 51 fly in from McCarran International, as there's no commuter traffic allowed. I'm guessing all the parking spaces are taken up by UFO parking. Employees fly in from a secret airline called Janet Airlines, an acronym which funnily enough stands for just another non-existent terminal. Janet may be America's most secretive airline. Anyone working it needs top level clearance. That's everybody working it. Even the flight attendants need to be cleared for top level clearance. Just in case they overhear a man in black suits talking about the Type 25 plasma pistol they recovered off the crash site of the Kigyar Scout they found just outside of Roswell, they know not to report that to anybody. Now no word on whether or not Janet Airlines contributes to air miles, but I have to imagine their frequent flyer reward program is pretty impressive.
Number 4. Employees are paid in cash. In 2010, some of the secrets about Area 51 were declassified, and former employees were able to talk about their time at the secretive military base. One of these former employees, a 72-year-old named James Nose, gave an interview about his time at Area 51 to the Seattle Times. James claimed not to have seen any UFOs or aliens, but hey, maybe that just wasn't declassified material he could talk about. The interview contains some interesting anecdotes about some US government covert ops, but what I find most interesting about the interview is his claim that several of the employees were paid in cash. He would be paid in cash, and as a result, there was no paperwork connecting him to Area 51, which is probably why my landlord also insists on being paid in cash. Other employees claimed that when they were paid by check, the checks would be from unrelated non-government companies such as Pan American. So although we don't know for sure what is being done at Area 51, we know that it is so secretive that they don't even want a record of who has worked for them.
Number 3. They're expanding. The most secret building in the world is getting bigger, slowly but surely each year, and no one on the outside knows why. And they're doing it the way they do everything, which is to say clandestinely and not telling nobody nothing. They've been expanding the area surrounding the base, buying up swaths of land to assimilate inside of it. From what can be observed, new hangars and new runways are being built. But, you know, again, It's impossible to ascertain what for because everything revolving around this building is top level clearance, so we only have wild mass guessing to go on. Obviously they're building more hangars because they're collecting more UFOs. I mean, what else could it really be? I'm a guy on a YouTube channel, I'm a trusted news source. They hit a bed of a snag in 2015 when the mass of land they were swallowing up was owned by a family who'd held the land for the past century. They refused their offers to give it up, and the Air Force offered the family $5.9 million. But the family wanted to hold out for more, as they felt it wasn't a good enough offer. And honestly, it's the US Air Force. We know they've got the money. Spring a little for it. It's not the first time the secretive base has grown. When it was first established in 1955, it was a little over 6 by 10 miles. But these days, the base has become so large, it's now 4,500 square miles across. Area 51 is getting big enough to be its own state. It's bigger than Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Delaware, the 3 best states. I can't tell you what they're doing or what they need all that space for, but it does keep me awake wondering.
Number 2, there's a presidential declaration exempting them from turning over classified materials. In the United States, an organization can be forced to disclose classified information for a variety of reasons. As an example, if the Environmental Protection Agency believes that an organization is disposing of toxic waste in a way that goes against local hazardous laws, they can order that organization to turn over relevant materials, classified or not, in order to aid in the EPA's investigation. On September 29, 1995, President Bill Clinton signed a presidential determination exempting Area 51 from these laws. As Clinton stated in his determination, "I find that it is in the paramount interest of the United States to exempt the United States Air Force's operating location near Groom Lake, Nevada, from any applicable requirement for the disclosure to unauthorized persons of classified information concerning that operating location. Therefore, pursuant to 42 U.S.C., I hereby exempt the Air Force's operating location near Groom Lake, Nevada from any federal, state, interstate, or local provision respecting control and abatement of solid waste or hazardous waste disposal that would require the disclosure of classified information concerning that operating location to any unauthorized person." This determination has to be renewed by the president every year, and we know for a fact that the next president, George W. Bush, chose to uphold and renew it, making this a rare example of bipartisanship.
They cover up a lot. Now look, this whole video we've been talking about everything they cover up, but it goes so much deeper than you know. You might think working at Area 51 would be your way into learning all the secrets the base has to offer. You know, pick up a broom, sweep something up, learn about the aliens. But you might be saddened to know even those with top-level clearance are still kept in the dark on just about everything. In the 90s, there was a bit of a controversy when several lower-level Area 51 workers tried to file a suit against Area 51 because exposure to the black site's hazardous materials was making them sick. Apparently, the base would have stacks of discarded equipment, scraps, and hazardous waste left around in open trenches the size of football fields, and then to dispose of them, workers would cover them in jet fuel and light it on fire, leading to toxic smoke blowing all throughout the base. Definitely sounds very safe. This smog was affectionately nicknamed London Fog by the workers in between bouts of coughing fits. Several workers came down with skin conditions or respiratory conditions from their time working the black site. But where things get curious is that they don't even know what was being burned around them. And when the workers tried to file their lawsuit, the base refused to clarify or even acknowledge what had been burned. In fact, the government outright refused to even acknowledge the name of the base, as up until 2013, they still pretended the thing didn't exist at all and were very careful in all official documentation to avoid saying the name of it ever. Did you know it wasn't even until 2013 that the base was ever officially acknowledged by a president? It was President Obama, and he was doing so in a bit of a jokey manner too. The government only acknowledged the workers after their lawyer had provided them with satellite photos of the base acquired from a dubious source. Whatever was being burned there was pretty serious stuff. I mean, we can only speculate. Plasma recovered from a Type 52 troop carrier? Ectoplasm? Unobtainium? We may never know. And that's what makes me want to know.